So I've put this off as long as possible because what I'm going to talk about today is actually going to be really uncomfortable for me, but if I don't record it right now, it's not going to get done at all. So I had a plan for what I wanted to do this month. I wanted to do a podcast about Breath of the Wild, but then I realised that next month is the anniversary, and also no one was available this month, so for thematic and scheduling reasons, it makes more sense to do it then. Instead, what I'm going to do is go through don't really want to call it failed, because it's not failed, I just sort of stopped working on it, project that I was planning to make last year. I made some of it. I made like a full design document with all of the information, basically from the start of the game to the end, and all the characters and everything. But it's just a bit too big in scope for me on my own, and I don't really know anyone else to work with at the moment. But at the same time, like I said, I don't want to call it failed, because I would like to do it. So I'm not going to go through everything with you. What I'm going to do is go through the prologue chapter. If I can get time as well, I did actually start making a prologue chapter in Twine. If you remember a couple of podcasts ago, it was like probably the second or third one, I spent a long time talking about how much I hate Twine, and it was while I was making the prologue for this. That was probably even 2 or 3 months after I wrote the entire design document or everything, so to give you some idea of like the sort of timetable of when I was working on it. But yeah, at some point, if I can be bothered going back to Twine, I will finish making it and release the prologue as well, so you can play what I'm going to describe to you. But like I said, just talking about this stuff makes me really uncomfortable. I don't like talking about my work until it's finished, and this may never even get finished, so I'm just going to be like, uncomfortable the entire time, hence putting it off. Also, when I'm done with this, I've got like some updates to do about like the channel and that, but this is going to be the main body of it. I don't know how long it's going to take. I don't think it's going to take very long, because it really depends on my storytelling skills, and I don't know if they're particularly strong. Imagine a sort of cyberpunk world. It's a cyberpunk world, but there are no humans anymore. Everyone's just robots. They're not really androids. They're human-esque, but not really. Like, they're bipedal, but that's about it. Not even all of them are bipedal, but the main character is. Like, everything's like harsh edges. There's no roundness. It's all very, like, bright. Like, neons, obviously. Like, think of, like, how cyberpunk looks. That sort of visual style. But aesthetically, I want the game to be, like, pixel art. Pixel art, but it'd be 2D layers in 3-dimensional space to give you the sort of depth that I would like. You play a character who you would name for yourself, but I called them Holden, which is, I'm sure you can guess why, so I'll probably refer to them as Holden while I talk about it here. Robot society is basically the same as ours, except they're connected to a thing called the network. It's kind of like a hive mind. Each person, each robot is still individual, so they have their own, like, wants and needs and things, but all of the information is stored outside. So you can have, like, personal things about you, but, like, things like street signs and stuff are stored on a network, which everyone is connected to. So they can all gain access to the network, and everything they need is stored there, but everything that is individual to them is stored on themselves. They can also then get sort of, like, backed up to the network in case of, like, physical damage and stuff. Oh, do I want to explain that now? No. Okay, so I'll explain more about the network as it comes up while I'm going. But for this, let's just start with how the main character wakes up. So basically, you wake up one morning and you're going to work. You and your best friend, you've been best friends forever, and you're essentially like, trying to think of a way of describing you. You're a tech startup, and you're currently just working off like investors as you build to launch your first project. And the first project you're working on is an AI called D.J.I.N. The reason it's called D.J.I.N is because I wanted some sort of like genie analog. But it's a backronym. It's called the Digital Jackdaw Interface Network. It's called that because I wanted it to be a bird. That's the real reason. There is like some thematic reasons for why I chose a jackdaw in particular. It's because it steals things. But so you have created this AI called D.J.I.N. It is capable of... It can grant a limited number of requests by modifying the network. So it can, like, go in and make slight changes to the network. And then, again, because it's a hive mind, it sort of replicates across the entire world, then, the entire population. So, say you change one thing in the network, it doesn't just change the network, it changes to functionally have always been that way. So, you could go in and, like, get $1 million currency. I don't know, I didn't decide on a currency name. You can go in and get, like, $1 million, and you will gain $1 million, but it will functionally have been that has always been. It will not be that you have gained $1 million, it will be that you've always had $1 million. So no one actually knows that's what you're making. You've just sort of, like, lied to everyone about what you were making in order to get the money to make it, and then you've made this, because if it works, you can literally just go back in time. Well, not go back in time, but you can use it to essentially change the network to say that it has always existed, and that you invented it years ago before anyone gave you any money, so the money will never have existed that they gave you to set this up. If it works, it will never have been an issue. So you and your best friend have essentially gambled on this working, and you've put everything you have into it. Right. So you wake up in the morning, and the first sort of area of the game is just like a brief tutorial sort of thing. Like, you just sort of wander around the town for a little bit. The idea is you can just, like, wander around and, like, see what things are like. So, like, learn about the area you live in, learn about the way the world's structured, the basic sort of stuff that you would expect. You'll go through the tutorial and you'll, like, meet people on the way and just, like, talk to them as you would. Just, like, say hello as you walk past them in the mornings and that sort of thing, and just gain some idea of how the world works. Eventually arrive at your office, which is in a skyscraper. It's like one of the biggest buildings in the city. And you take the lift up to your office. And that's the tutorial bit. Today is special because today is the day that D.J.I.N is going to launch. Not going to be like a hard launch. It's more of a soft launch. Like, you're going to actually finally activate it and make sure it actually works. So you arrive in your office and you sort of, like, wander around, fixing all the final pieces, talking to your friend and gaining, like, you as a player gaining, like, insight into your relationship and stuff. Like, checking how things are going and that. And then it's finally time to turn it on. So your friend says that you can have the first try, because you're each going to have a go. So I'd have, like, you presented with, like, a couple of random options, because at the time I feel like you wouldn't really know the character all that well, so I was just going to give, like, random, like, shitty options, like a load of money, or, like, to be famous, or some shit like that, something that doesn't really matter. You do your choice. I really wish I could, like, tell stories better, because, like, this is, like, a really important thematic moment, but I don't feel like I'm doing it justice in the way I'm describing it. You take your wish. It goes well. It's proven to work. So you go off and start celebrating. And, like, just, like, robots wouldn't drink champagne, but that sort of moment, like, you'd go and get the champagne and, like, crack it, and you'd be all celebrating and shit, and you're, like, in a corner pouring drinks. Like, again, obviously doesn't make sense for a robot, but just to give you some idea of what I'm talking about. And your friend takes their turn. And your friend wishes that you had never existed. Now, as I was saying earlier, D.J.I.N works by changing the network to have always been that way. So you would never have existed. So your family would never have known you existed. The world at large would never have known you existed. But not only that, because it is the thing that makes the most sense, all of your accomplishments become your friend's accomplishments. Despite having worked on this together, all of the work on D.J.I.N would have gone to them. So all of the accolades that would come along with it would be theirs. But to get this, you also have to die. As I was saying, you're connected to the network, but you're also, like, an individual person. So if you still exist, that will cause issues. So your friend wishes for this, and then you're just sort of like, what? And your friend tries to shoot you. As he tries to shoot you, you grab D.J.I.N, which is like it's just like, imagine like a hard drive or something that it's just stored on. You grab it and rip it out of the console and run. And he sets off a volley of shots, and the last one, like, hits you, and you stumble backwards and fall through a window. You crash land in the street and slowly pass out as you can hear the robots in the background doing nothing because you're no longer on the network. And they can only interpret the things that are on the network, so they don't even see you as existing anymore. Like, you've already been wiped out of existence. You are nothing. You would hear the distant sound of the trash robot coming along to... It's a bit complicated. They don't actually, like, collect trash as such. They just sort of run their routes and collect it, but they can't actually see it because it's not part of the network. It's complicated, but it doesn't really matter. It's not really the point. You would hear the trash robot coming along to collect your corpse, and you slowly pass out, and the last thing you see before you pass out is Jin. So what I mean by seeing Jin is that as you, like, take it from the console, you, I don't know, plug it into yourself, some shit like that. I'm a little bit vague on, like, the tiny details like that. Like, I assume it's not really, like, a hard drive or something. Like, if you imagine the memory chips in Cyberpunk, where they, like, take them and, like, slot them into their heads, like that sort of thing. So, like, Jin is inside you now. So the issue by that is that your friend can no longer use Jin, so Jin no longer exists, functionally. But you're also dead. And that's the end of the prologue. So, I hope that was described okay. I'm gonna go through and, like, edit out all the weird bits where I just pause for, like, 10 minutes while I try and gather my thoughts. And when I go over the same bit over and over again because it didn't make sense to me. Hopefully, at least, you get some idea of what I was going for with the prologue. I'm not great at describing the individual details, but I think the ending of it makes sense. The idea for this, actually, I got when Run the Jewels 4 came out. That came out on the 3rd of June. So to give you some idea of how long I've been having this idea for, it's particularly inspired by the song Goonies vs. E.T. I think, again, I spoke about this in one of the earlier podcasts. Might even have been the same podcast where I was complaining about Twine. So the idea is that I was listening to the song Goonies vs. E.T. and there is a line in it which is, if I make another wish, I would wish for a wish for you. And it set off this idea for me, which was, what if you could wish for wishes for other people? Hence the genie stuff. And then what if, like, this person you loved more than anything, like, you wished that they had this wish, and then their wish was, like, a complete betrayal. Just ultimately, like, destroying you, and, like, this, like, massive, like, betrayal of your relationship, and you're left in this sense of, like, not understanding why this has happened. Because, like I say, they're, like, the most important thing to you, and then they just completely betray you in this situation where you're giving them as much power as you possibly could, and their response is to take everything from you. Like, it was just, like, a really interesting idea for me, so I spent a while trying to, like, workshop ways of making it make sense. Originally, it was some sort of, like, it was literally just a genie, but I didn't really find that idea all that interesting. So then it became an AI, which could do stuff, but then I couldn't work out a reason why, like, how the AI would kill you. So that's when I got the idea of it being robots connected to a network from. And I spent, like, a really long time working on it. And it's like I say, I have, like, a full sort of, like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 chapters. Like, technically, the first 2 are 1 chapter. It's the prologue that I was just talking about is kind of split into 2. It's, like, up to entering the building, and then from the building to your death is, like, technically 2 chapters, but it's basically just the prologue. But I've got, like, a load of, like, stuff about what happens after you die, and, like, a journey through the world and all that sort of shit, and, like, it's just cool. It's just like an interesting idea. And I really want to do it justice, because I actually really enjoy the idea. I put, like, a lot of work into it, and I think it can... It's not going to be one of those things where I'm not expecting, like, I'm not like, oh, it's going to have, like, a massive cultural impact. It's not that sort of shit. I'm just like, I really like this idea, and I want to get it finished. But I don't know if that'll ever happen. But I really want it to. So the sort of gameplay that I had in my head for it was like, it was mostly just like a adventure game. Like, you'd be clicking around to move your character, and you'd click on the things you want to look at and pick up the stuff. The reason I wanted Jin to be a bird is because I thought it'd be cool if you had a bird companion. It's also going to be another entry in the year of people with birds, which, granted, isn't really a year so much as it is the past, like, half decade. But games with birds are cool. I like birds. Particularly, like, corvids. Hence Jackdaw. So, like, gameplay-wise, Jin has also been disconnected from the network. So they can only sort of affect, like, a limited, localized area now. So essentially they would just, like, highlight the things in the world that you can interact with. That's pretty much it. But you also wouldn't be able to see the world. So you'd also, like, after your death, you'd see the world in a very different way. And the journey is about, like, coming to terms with that and, like, finding out why your friend betrayed you and, like, this whole side of the world that you didn't see before. I don't want to get into too much details because, like, again, I would really like to finish this. I just really like the idea. It's an awful lot of work. I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to finish it, but I really want to. So, like I say, one thing I would like to do is get at least the Twine version of the prologue finished and release that, and I'm going to try and do that by the time, well, probably with next month's podcast. I wanted to do it for this one, but that gives me, 3 days? 1, 2, 3, 3 days. It gives me literally 3 days to do all of this, do all the work that I normally do, and finish working on the prologue for that, which just isn't enough time. But spread out over the course of the next month, I should be able to do it. So, speaking of next month, and with that being the end of my sort of, like, story time, I'll give a little update. At the end of last month, I started a new channel, and it's going okay. It's not doing amazingly. It's not like it's suddenly taken off really well, but it's doing about as well as I expected it to. It's actually, in some ways, doing better, because I have a whole 4 subscribers on it, and, like, that's really good. It's way better than I expected it to get, to be honest. On there, as I said in that video, are all of my gameplay videos now. If, for some reason, you've been on this channel and wondered, where have they all gone? I don't know why you would, but if you have, they're all there now, which will be linked in this description. It's linked in the description for all of my main videos now. It's also in the end card for that. So on there is all of my gameplay videos, and I've also started doing LPs again. At the time of recording, the final episode for my first LP will be going up tomorrow. I did a LP of Stories: The Path of Destinies, and it was really good. It was surprisingly fun. It gets pretty buggy towards the end. It's kind of broken in some ways, but it was a fun time. It's weird how long I could go without noticing really simple things, like how you don't need to be on the normal sword to open normal sword doors. You can be on any sword. Like that sort of thing. I noticed when I was like 20 endings in to a game with 25 endings, which, yeah, there's 25 endings to this game, and I did all of them. The last episode is the canon ending. So, you've got that to look forward to tomorrow. So, the reason I did that is because we reached the $10 goal on my Patreon, which was just do another LP. Because I took basically all of last year off from doing LPs because I hated doing the Guacamelee 2 one that much that I just stopped. But yeah, so I'll put it as a Patreon goal, and we reached it, so I did that. And then in the time since I reached that, I have been paid some money and reached another goal on Patreon as well. So I'm now also starting next month doing 2 more LPs, one of which will be Bullet Witch, which doesn't sound like it's going to be a fun time, because I did stream that the other day, and I did up to the flying Leviathan eye boss. It was fucking terrible. It was honestly one of the worst things I've done. Also, if you suddenly hear my voice change, it's because I've taken a drink. It was like a legitimately terrible time. But also apparently there are only like 3 or 4 more levels left at this point. So it won't be very long at the very least. Other than that, I am also going to do an LP of Yakuza 0. Or Yakuza 0. Well, I suppose it is Yakuza, but I've always said Yakuza. yeah, I'm going to be doing 0. Which I really want to get back into. What I mean is that I did my video on my stream on it, and now I just want to play more, which is nice, but I'm taking a little bit of a break from doing anything really heavy until the Stories LP is actually, like, completely finished with on my channel, and then I'm going to go back into doing these, because doing the LPs is fun. I actually really like doing them, and they're not super strenuous, but they do take up a lot of time. Because the way I did the Stories one was I just, because of its structure, which is literally just play through the story and do one ending, I would press the record button, do one ending, then press the record button again. And then I would edit it, and then, depending, either render it in one go or render them in batches. It changed what I felt like doing at the time, basically. So it meant that I was, like, the actual recording and editing process isn't too bad, because the editing is basically just a template that I just slide things into, and the recording is just play the game for a bit. The issue really is the render times, because it takes about 1.5 seconds per second of video, right? Which means a 30-minute video takes 45 minutes to render. And that's for, like, every single video I make, which, to give you some idea, just the 3 half-hour videos that I do, like, to fully make those 3 for the week, like, including, like, research, editing, rendering, uploading, and all that sort of shit, that takes me about 7 hours. And then, on top of that, I was doing a 25-episode LP. So it wasn't, like, particularly hard to do, it was just very time-consuming. So I'm taking a little bit of time so I can get myself going on some other projects, and then going back into that. Which might be something that I do every time. I'm trying to work out if it'd be nice to have a little bit of time off each month, or a little bit of time off between LPs. My plan at the moment is to have 1 week off at the end of this LP, and then have the next one start. Well, not start, but, like, the next episode of it go up, because technically it starts with the half hour, it doesn't really matter, but whatever. But I'm not sure if I want to instead have, like, a couple of days break at the end of each month to give myself time to work on, like, other videos and the game that I want to make, and that sort of stuff. And I suppose I need to make that decision before the end of next month, but right now I'm not totally sure which to do. I'm also kind of, like, planning on changing my upload schedule a little bit. Not in that anything will be going up. Like, I'm not changing the days or anything, and I'm not changing the frequency either. I'm just changing what types of videos go up on what days. The idea used to be that I would do, like, a sentence, then a scripted video, then a sentence, then a podcast, and so on and so forth. What I might do instead is do the scripted video at the start of the month and a podcast at the end of the month, and have the sentence videos run in the weeks in between, just because it gives me more time in the middle to do both the scripted and podcast video. Then I think that will work out better for me. But if other people don't prefer that, or if I notice that for some reason it makes my things perform weirdly, like, then I won't do it, but I'll decide that later on. I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to cover. So, as I've already said, next month's scripted video, I'm not going to tell you unless you pay me on Patreon. Some of you already do, so if you feel like it, you can just ask me. But actually, by this point, you'll know. Well, within 4 hours of this podcast going live, you'll be able to see it. But yeah, so I'm not going to tell you what the scripted video is next month, but I will give you a clue in that it's for a game series which has an anniversary next month, and it's not the one you're thinking of. And then the other thing is a podcast about the Breath of the Wild, because I just wanted to talk to someone about Breath of the Wild for a bit. So that one will be coming at the end of February. I forgot what month it was. And possibly with a new guest. Should be nice to hear from someone different for once. It sounds like I'm, like, insulting Gary, which isn't the point. I didn't mean to insult Gary. I'm sorry, Gary. I just meant it'd be nice to have someone other than just me talking to myself, because the last 2 podcasts I'm just sort of rambling at this point. Let's go with the outro. Special thanks to my board members Heaven Over Hell, Justin Wood, Hobbs, Goopy Vegeta, Gunrunner, and Wassa. You can join my Patreon at patreon.com/Holden Gatsby, and for $1 a month, you'll get to see what I'm working on early and get exclusive roles in my Discord, along with other rewards that I might think of. One new reward that I'm going to add is that if you become the mysterious benefactor tier, I'm going to put an emote of you in my server, just for a bit, like for as long as you're on that tier. You can also just follow me there if you want to for free, as it's probably the best place to see all of my content as soon as it's available. There's links to the Patreon, along with my Discord, Twitter, Twitch, and all the other podcast platforms in the description of this episode, along with the YouTube channel as well. Finally, don't forget you can email me using podencastby@gmail.com if you've got anything you want to say. Thanks for sticking around. Bye. Special thanks to my patrons Heaven Over Hell, Justin Wood, Hobbs, Koopy Vegeta, Gunrunner, and Water.